Parshas Bamidbar and Chag Shavuos. This week's Parsha talks about the counting of the Bnei Yisrael and the arrangement of the tribes of the Shvatim around the Mishkan. And the verse says, this is in Aleph Nun Beis, that's chapter 1, verse 52. It says, V'chonu Bnei Yisrael, ish al machaneo v'ish al diglo litzivosam. It says that they encamped, each person with his camp, meaning with his designated area, with his shevet, his tribe, and with the degel of the tribe, with the flag, the colors of the tribe. Each tribe, according to Chazal, each tribe had its own designation that reflected the essential qualities of that tribe. And Rabbi Yaakov Kaminetsky asks the question, says that they went out of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, with Biyad Ramah, with a hand held up high, meaning as victors. So why did they wait a whole year to camp on the basis of their degolim, of their flags? And he says that flags, when they are assigned to groups, they have the effect of galvanizing or coalescing the group, but they also have the effect of separating and distinguishing one group from another. And the risk you run with doing that is that it facilitates a pirud, some kind of a disjunction, a separation within the people. And so he says that until the Mishkan was built, there was a risk that the flags would create differences, unnecessary differences, or a feeling of dislocation among the tribes. Once the Mishkan was built, however, and once there were encampments surrounding the Mishkan, then everybody was facing in the same direction. They were all, as it were, they were all facing the Mishkan, and therefore the risk of pirud, of division among the Shvatim, among the tribes, was significantly lessened because there was this common goal, this common focus. Now with Shavuos, we know that there was a common focus, Vayichan Yisrael neged Ahor, the verb for camping, the children of Israel, Israel camped across the mountain, from the mountain. So Chazal say Vayichan is in Lashon Yachid, it's in the singular, and Chazal say Ki ish echad b'lev echad. They were like one man with one heart, meaning that there was a tremendous amount of unity and identification with the other. And this was the either the effect or the precursor of Kabbalas Torah, of the receiving of the Torah, which we did on what we now call the holiday of Shavuos, and which we are about to celebrate. Now, there's another Gemara on Daf Peches in Shabbos, that is on 88, side A, which says as follows: Vayisiatzu b'sachtis hahar. There's another description. They encamped at the foot of the mountain. And Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama Chasa Malamed Shekofa Kodesh Baruch Aleim Hahar Kegigis. It's the word for the bottom of the mountain is besachtis, which literally can mean underneath the mountain. And Chazal pick up on that nuance, and it says that the Almighty held the mountain, dangled the mountain over their heads as though it were a barrel, the kind of barrel in which one would store spirits. And according to this Agadata, this passage in the Gemara, it says, "V'amar lahem," God dangled the mountain over them and said to them, "Im atem mekablim haTorah mutov, v'imlav sham teikv raschem." If you accept the Torah, wonderful, and if not, there will be your burial place. So Amar Rav Ahron Yaakov mikam odor Rabbi l'Oraisa. Rav Ahron Yaakov says, well, you have now an affirmative defense to the Torah, to the obligatory nature of the Torah, because you could say we were forced. God dangled the mountain over our heads. So Amar Rava Afal Pichein Hoder Kiblu b'Me'achashrosh. Even though that is the case, nevertheless, the Jews accepted the Torah in the times of Achashverosh, the Chsiv, Kimu v'Kiblu Hayudim, Kiblu Mashik, Kiblu Kvar. It says that the Jews fulfilled and they accepted the Torah, which seems to be in the reverse of the way it usually goes. Usually you accept and then you fulfill. And the Gemara reads into that verse in Megillas Esther that it means that they fulfilled that which they had already accepted, meaning that there was a reacceptance of the Torah. Now the question is, what's this dangling of the mountain? And according to, I heard from my Rabbi, Rav Ahron Soloveichik, the name of the Meshech Chochma, that it is not referring to an actual physical dangling of the mountain, but rather it's a compunction that the Jews had to accept the Torah because, after all, God had just demonstrated all of his miracles and wonders on Mount Sinai. And by extension, you could even say, although I don't think this is in the words of the Meshech Chochma, but you could say they had experienced all of the miracles and wonders that took place in Egypt, leading to the ultimate redemption. And then they witnessed the crossing, they participated in the crossing of the Red Sea, miraculous events. And then the sound and light show on Mount Sinai, where everything shook and trembled, and there was fire and smoke, and people saw sounds. Just an overwhelming sensory display. And says the Meshech Chochma that it was pretty much impossible for the Bnei Yisrael, for the children of Israel, to say, no, we don't want to accept the Torah. I mean, if you're in the middle of all of this, and the Almighty comes to you in whatever way he does, and he says, will you accept my Torah? You're going to say yes, because the presence of God is so manifest, it's so obvious, it's so overwhelming and powerful that you really don't have a choice. But that creates a problem of enforceability, because if you accept upon yourself something which you don't have a choice, then it's problematic. It's not enforceable. A contract under duress, both in Jewish law and in civil law, is not an enforceable agreement. And we have a similar problem with a child. My daughter Shira and Rabbi Meir Simcha Stromer just had a baby boy last night. The Shalom Zachar will Amir Hashem be this Friday night. The Bris will Amir Hashem be Thursday. And at the Bris, what usually happens is the baby comes in, presumably not knowing what's going on, and experiences the bris, and then the father says the bracha of lahachniso, bracha Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, sheker d'shalom tzasav tzivanu lahachniso b'riso shel Avram Avinu, blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who commanded us to bring this child into the covenant of Abraham. The question is, how can an 8-day-old make an agreement? How can he make a covenant? The covenant is with the child and the Almighty. How can it be enforceable? It's literally under duress. The baby comes in most cases, literally kicking and screaming, or at least screaming. How is this enforceable? Well, if you take this Gemara of Kaf Aleim Hakegigis, which we learned from the Gemara in Shabbos, and we say there is an answer to enforceability, and that is that they accepted the Torah later. Well, what about between the time that they first got the Torah and then re-accepted the Torah? And I will add parenthetically, the re-acceptance of the Torah is now at a period where there is hester panim, and there is a lack of duress, a lack of compulsion. And apparently, the acceptance of the Torah when there is a lack of compulsion serves to ratify the acceptance of the Torah, to validate the original acceptance of the Torah, so that the Torah was indeed enforceable from the moment it was given, even though it was given under duress, but since it was later accepted with complete volition, therefore had the effect of being enforceable from day one. One could say that the same thing happens with a child. When a child grows up after having been the subject of a bris, but not voluntarily, but as he grows up, if he conducts his life in a way that shows that he is shalem with the bris, that he is part of the chain of tradition and carries out the will of God as he understands it to be, when he has the opportunity to exercise his own volition, that will in effect ratify the bris that he underwent when he was an infant. And the language of the bris ceremony is quite precise in this regard. At the very end of the last formal recitation, it says, Zeh hakaton gadol yihiyeh. This small child, a katan means small, but it also means minor, a child who does not have the capacity to contract or otherwise engage in legally enforceable matters. Zeh hakaton, if you're worried that this child is too small, is too young, does not have capacity to enter into bris, don't worry. He will grow up. He will become of the age of majority. And just like he had entered into the covenant when he didn't have a choice, he will engage in those things which require volition. They require a willingness to do it. That's Torah. You can bring a child to school, but you cannot make him learn. And chuppah, a person only gets married. A kedushin is valid. A marriage is valid only if it's done mida'as, if it's done willingly and volitionally. And masim tovim is good acts which are only performed when a person wants to perform them. So what we bless the child and express confidence from about the child is, just as he entered into this covenant without volition, when the time comes and he grows up, just like the Bnei Yisrael accepted the Torah when there was an absence of duress, and that acceptance is valid as of the first opportunity when there was duress. Similarly, with a child who goes through the bris, our bracha to him is that he will, in fact, follow in the footsteps of his parents and will validate and ratify his entering into the bris. Have a good Shabbos and a good Yom Tov and a good re-Kabbalas HaTorah.